Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Tuesday, February 20th, 2024. It's time for Bible Reading Fellowship, formerly known as Morning Devotions. We're going to pick up our reading this morning in Second Kings chapter 1. 2 Kings chapter 1. We are flying through the historical record of ancient Israel. Reading, of course, out of the LSB. If you do not have your own copy of this translation, you can open up a second tab on your computer. Keep this one open. Good afternoon, John. Open up a second tab and in the search bar type read, read.lsbible.org, read.lsbible.org. And when that page opens up, type 2 Kings 1. 2 Kings 1 in the search window. Follow along as we read, and when we get to the end of the chapter or the bottom of your page or screen there, just click on the right arrow. That'll move you over to 2 Kings 2. Peter, good morning. Maria, good morning. Sarah, good morning. It's going to be beautiful out today. It is bright and sunny. It's going to be in the 50s. We're going to be pushing 70 degrees beginning of next week. And we'll bounce up and down between 40 and 60 along the way, but no rain until next week sometime in the forecast. I don't know. We're pushing the end of February. We can get snow into April. I don't think so, though, because the El Nino out in California, it typically means mild winters for us. We did have a blizzard. We did have a significant event at about 3 feet of snow in a matter of days, but I think we're pretty much done with that. So it's going to be nice. It's going to be nice today. Last night, my editor sent me another 5 chapters of my book that she has edited. So I have 5 chapters to go through today to approve those edits. So I'm going to work on that this morning when we're done here. Probably get out on the streets for a bit. Was out yesterday afternoon for a couple of hours or so. Distributed 5 Bibles. Praise God for that. And had a nice conversation with a lady named Rhonda. Probably about my age, as a member of a church not too far from where I was standing yesterday at 46th and Pine. And said she was born again at the age of 21. And she mentioned, just being convicted of her sin and repenting, and but then fell away, and then came back, and then her dad died 21 years ago, and she hasn't really felt close to the Lord since. But she would insist she's born again, and at the same time would insist she doesn't know if she's going to heaven or hell. And so that made for an interesting conversation. So in the end, I told her to focus, to look, stop looking in the mirror for her assurance, but look to the cross, look to Christ. So you be praying for Rhonda. Chris, good morning. So I'll probably get out later on today. We'll likely do that. We shall see. Well, yeah, that's the same message I've been bringing to you for years, Chris. Don't look in the mirror. Look to the cross. Look to Christ for your hope. Look to Christ for your salvation. Don't look to your performance. Look to Christ. Look to Christ. Look, if I look to my performance, I would have no hope. I would be confident that I was going to hell if I look to my performance. And whenever I look to my performance, whenever I focus on that, never goes well. Never ever goes well. And so when I find myself doing that, when I find myself looking to my performance, which leads to despondency, which leads to varying degrees of anxiety or depression or doubt, I remind myself to look to the cross. That's where hope is found. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. Well, then, Chris, keep looking. Repent and believe. Repent and believe, Chris. That's the only way. That's the only way. Repent and believe the gospel. That's your only hope, my friend. It's your only hope. It's your only hope. That's the only hope anyone has. Anything that disguises itself as hope apart from Jesus Christ, well, is not hope at all. Hope is found in Jesus Christ. So keep looking. All right. Why don't we get started? Again, we're picking up our reading this morning in 2 Kings chapter 1. 2 Kings chapter 1, reading out of the Legacy Standard Bible. And we'll begin with Spurgeon's morning devotion for today. Not sure how much we're going to read today. We're going to read. All right. Let's begin our time in a word of prayer and let's get started. What? Oh, yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. I put 2 Kings 1. I put 2 Kings 1 in, it's actually 2 Kings 3. We're starting in 2 Kings 3. So we read the first 2 chapters yesterday. So we're in 2 Kings chapter 3 this morning. 2 Kings chapter 3. Yeah, Chris, don't worry about angering me. I don't get angry with you, Chris. So don't worry about that. Do not worry about that. All right. We're starting in 2 Kings chapter 3 today. 2 Kings chapter 3. 2 Kings chapter 3, reading out of the Legacy Standard Bible. Let's begin our time in a word of prayer and we'll get started. Father, you are so good, so merciful, so kind, so gracious, so loving, Father. You are wonderful. You are beautiful beyond description, too marvelous for words, too wonderful for comprehension, like nothing ever seen or heard. Father, as I think of just warming my face in the beautiful sunshine outside today, I pray, Father, that we would bask in the glow of your radiance, your majesty. You are marvelous. You are great. You are glorious. To think of one day being in your presence, to think that one day we will set our eyes upon our Creator and we will not perish. And we will look on to the glorified Christ and we will see him as he is. And we will worship him and serve him. We will be perfectly ministered to by him. Oh, how great and marvelous that will be. Until that time, let us look with expectancy to that day, with hope to that day, and at the same time, help us, Father, to live lives that are pleasing to you in the here and now, in preparation, Father, in preparation for one day being with you in glory. I can't wait. I can't wait. I can't wait, Father. Lord, I am thankful for this day. I am thankful for this day that you have made. Let us all rejoice and be glad in it, Father. If for those of us who will be working today, whether it's in the home or in an office or in evangelism or whatever it might be, help us, Father, for your glory and with praise in our hearts, do our work heartily unto you. Father, use the reading of your word this morning to prepare us to serve you, to worship you, to love you, to adore you, to think about you, and to long to be with you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Spurgeon's morning devotion for today is drawn from 2 Corinthians 7:6, 2 Corinthians 7:6, which reads in part, God that comforteth those that are cast down. And who comforteth like him? Go to some poor, melancholy, distressed child of God. Tell him sweet promises and whisper in his ear choice words of comfort. He is like the deaf adder. He listens not to the voice of the charmer. Charm he never, charm he never so wisely. He is drinking gall and wormwood, and comfort him as you may, it will be only a note or two of mournful resignation that you will get from him. You will bring forth no psalm of praise, no hallelujahs, no joyful sonnets. But let God come to his child. Let him lift up his countenance, and the mourner's eyes glisten with hope. Do you not hear him sing? 'Tis paradise, if thou art there. If thou depart, 'tis hell. You could not have cheered him, but the Lord has done it. He is the God of all comfort. There is no balm in Gilead, but there is balm in God. There is no physician among the creatures, but the Creator is Jehovah Raphi. It is marvelous how one sweet word of God will make a piece of gold, will make whole songs for Christians. One word of God is like a piece of gold, and the Christian is the gold beater and can hammer that promise out for whole weeks. So then, poor Christian, thou needest not sit down in despair. Go to the Comforter and ask him to give thee consolation. Thou art a poor dry well. You have heard it said that when a pump is dry, go to God. Ask him to shed abroad his joy in thy heart, and then thy joy shall be full. Do not go to earthly acquaintances, for you will find them Job's comforters after all. But go first and foremost to thy God, that comforteth those that are cast down. And you will soon say, in the multitude of my thoughts within me, thy comforts delight my soul. Amen. All right. 2 Kings chapter 3, 2 Kings chapter 3, reading out of the Legacy Standard Bible, the LSB, God's Word tells us this. Now, Jehoram, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel at Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. And he did, and we're going to hear this a lot, and he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, though not like his father and his mother, and he took away the sacred pillar of Baal, which his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin. He did not turn away from them. Now Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep breeder, and used to pay the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. But it happened that when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. And King Jehoram went out to Samaria at that time and mustered all Israel. Then he went and sent word to Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to fight against Moab? And he said, I will go up. I am as you are, my people as your people, my horses as your horses. And he said, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way of the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel went with the king of Judah and the king of Edom, and they went around on a 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the camp or for the cattle that followed them. Then the king of Israel said, alas, for Yahweh has called these 3 kings to give them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not a prophet of Yahweh here, that we may inquire of Yahweh by him? And one of the kings of Israel's servants answered and said, Elisha, the son of Shaphat, is here, who used to pour water on the hands of Elijah. And Jehoshaphat said, the word of Yahweh is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. Now Elisha said to the king of Israel, what do I have to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and to the prophets of your mother. And the king of Israel said to him, no, for Yahweh has called these 3 kings together to give them into the hand of Moab. And Elisha said, as Yahweh of hosts lives, before whom I stand, were it not that I regard the presence of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, I would not look at you nor see you. So now bring me a musician. And it came about when the musician played that the hand of Yahweh came upon him, and he said, thus says Yahweh, make this valley full of trenches. For thus says Yahweh, you shall not see wind, nor shall you see rain. Yet the valley shall be filled with water, so that you shall drink, both you and your livestock and your cattle. And this is but a light thing in the sight of Yahweh. He will also give the Moabites into your hand. Then you shall strike every fortified city and every choice city, and fell every good tree, and stop all springs of water, and mar every good piece of land with stones. Then it happened in the morning, about the time of offering the sacrifice, that behold, water came by the way of Edom, and the country was filled with water. Now all the Moabites heard that the king had come up to fight against them, and they summoned all who were able to put on armor and older, and they stood on the border. Then they arose early in the morning, and the sun shone on the water, and the Moabites saw the water opposite them as red as blood. Then they said, "This is blood. The kings have surely fought together, and they have struck down one another. So now Moab to the spoil." So they came to the camp of Israel, and the Israelites arose and struck the Moabites. So they fled before them, and they went forward in the land, striking down the Moabites. Thus they tore down the cities, and each one threw a stone on every piece of good land and filled it. And they stopped all the springs of water and felled all the good trees until in Kir Hareseth they let its stones remain. However, the slingers went about it and struck it. Then the king of Moab saw that the battle was too strong for him, so he took with him 700 men who drew swords to break through to the king of Edom, but they could not. So he took his oldest son, who was to reign in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. And there came great wrath against Israel. They set out from him and returned to their own land. Chapter 4. Now a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elijah, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that your servant feared Yahweh, and the creditor has come to take my 2 children to be his slaves." And Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" And she said, "Your servant woman has nothing in the house except a jar of oil." Then he said, "Go, ask for vessels for yourself from those outside, from all your neighbors, even empty vessels. Do not get a few, and you shall go in and shut the door behind you and your sons, and pour out into all these vessels, and you shall set aside what is full." So she went from him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They were bringing the vessels to her, and she poured. Now it happened that when the vessels were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another vessel." And he said to her, "There is not one vessel more." And the oil stopped. Then she came and told the man of God, and he said, "Go sell the oil and pay your debt, and you and your sons can live on the rest." Now there came a day when Elisha passed over to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she prevailed upon him to eat food. Now it happened as often as she passed by that he turned in there to eat food. And she said to her husband, "Behold, now I know that this is a holy man of God passing by us continually. Please let us make a little walled upper chamber, and let us set a bed for him there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand. And it will be, when he comes to us, that he can turn in there." Now it happened that one day he came there and turned into the upper chamber, and there he lay down. Then he said to Gehazi, his young man, "Call this Shunammite." So he called her, and she stood before him. And he said to him, "Say now to her, behold, you have been careful for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Would you be spoken for to the king or to the commander of the army?" And she answered, "I live among my own people." So he said, "What then is it to be done for her?" And Gehazi answered, "Truly, she has no son, and her husband is old." And he said, "Call her." So he called her, and she stood in the doorway. Then he said, "At this season next year you will embrace a son." And she said, "No, my lord, O man of God, do not lie to your servant woman." Then the woman conceived and bore a son at that season the next year, as Elisha had said to her. Then the child was grown, and the day came that he went out to his father to the reapers. And he said to his father, "My head, my head." And he said to his young man, "Carry him to his mother." Then he carried him and brought him to his mother, and he sat on her knees until noon, and then he died. Then she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door behind him, and went out. And she called to her husband and said, "Please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys, that I may run to the man of God and return." And he said, "Why will you go to him today? It is neither new moon nor Sabbath." She said, "It is well." Then she saddled a donkey and said to her young man, "Drive and go. Do not hold back the pace of the ride for me unless I tell you." So she went and came to the man of God to Mount Carmel. Now it happened that when the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi, his young man, "Behold, there is the Shunammite. Please run, please run now to meet her, and say to her, 'It is well. Is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with the child?" And she answered, "It is well." And then she came to the man of God to the hill and took hold of his feet, and Gehazi came near to push her away. But the man of God said, "Let her alone, for her soul is bitter within her, and Yahweh has hidden it from me and has not told me." Then she said, "Did I ask for a son from my Lord? Did I not say, 'Do not deceive me'?" Then he said to Gehazi, gird up your loins and take my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him, and if anyone greets you, do not answer him, and lay my staff on the boy's face. But the mother of the boy said, as Yahweh lives, and as your soul lives, I will not forsake you. And he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi passed on before them and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So he returned to meet him and told him, saying, the boy is not awakened. Then Elisha came into the house, and behold, the boy was dead and laid on his bed. So he entered and shut the door behind them both and prayed to Yahweh. And he went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth and his eyes on his eyes and his hands on his hands. And he stretched himself on him, and the flesh of the child became warm. Then he returned and walked in the house once back and forth, and went up and stretched himself on him. And the boy sneezed 7 times, and the boy opened his eyes. And then he called Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite. So he called her. Then she came to him, and he said, take up your son. Then she came in and fell at his feet and bowed herself to the ground, and she took up her son and went out. Now Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. As the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, he said to his young man, put on a large pot and boil stew for the sons of the prophets. Then one went out into the field to gather herbs, and found a wild vine, and gathered from it wild gourds, filling his cloak, and came and sliced them into the pot of stew, for they did not know what they were. So they poured it out for the men to eat. And it happened that as they were eating of the stew, they cried out and said, O man of God, there is death in the pot. And they were unable to eat. But he said, now bring flour. He threw it into the pot and said, pour it out for the people, and that they may eat. Then there was no harm in the pot. Now a man came from Baal Shalisha, and brought the man of God bread of the first fruits, 12 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in a sack. And he said, give them to the people that they may eat. And his attendant said, what will I give this before 100 men? But he said, give them to the people that they may eat, for thus says Yahweh, they shall eat and have some left over. So he gave it before them, and they ate and had some left over, according to the word of Yahweh. Chapter 5. Now Naaman, commander of the army of the king of Aram, was a great man with his master and highly respected, because by him Yahweh had given salvation to Aram. The man was also a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Now the Arameans had gone out in marauding bands and had taken captive a little girl from the land of Israel, and she waited on Naaman's wife. Hey, Samantha. We are in 2 Kings chapter 5, picking up now in verse 3. And she said to her mistress, I wish that my master were before the prophet who was in Samaria. Then he would cure him of his leprosy. Then Naaman went in and told his master, saying, thus and thus spoke the girl who is from the land of Israel. Then the king of Aram said, go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So he went and took in his hand 10 talents of silver and 6,000 shekels of gold and 10 changes of clothes. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, saying, so now, as this letter comes to you, behold, I have sent Naaman, my servant, to you, that you may cure him of his leprosy. Now it happened that when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, am I God to put to death and to make alive? That this man is sending word to me to cure a man of his leprosy? But know now, and see how he is seeking a quarrel against me. Got to say goodbye to my ladies. Hang on. I love you. Bye. All right. Look forward to hearing how it goes. Verse 8. Now it happened when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, that he sent word to the king, saying, why have you torn your clothes? Now let him come to me, and he shall know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came with his horses and his chariots and stood at the doorway of the house of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh will be restored to you, and you will be clean. But Naaman was furious and went away and said, behold, I said to myself, he will surely come out and to meet me, stand and call on the name of Yahweh as God, and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in wrath. Then his servants approached and spoke to him and said, My father, had the prophet spoken with you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then when he says to you, Wash and be clean? So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God. And his flesh was restored like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. Then he returned to the man of God with all his camp, and came and stood before him, and said, Behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth, but in Israel. So now please take a blessing from your servant. But he said, As Yahweh lives, before whom I stand, I will take nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. So Naaman said, If not, please let your servant at least be given 2 mules load of earth, for your servant will no longer offer burnt offering, nor will he sacrifice to other gods, but to Yahweh. In this matter, may Yahweh pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, Yahweh pardon your servant in this matter. And he said to him, Go in peace. So he went from him some distance. Then Gehazi, the young man of Elisha, the man of God, said to him, Behold, my master has spared this Naaman the Aramean by not receiving from his hands what he brought. As Yahweh lives, I will run after him and take something from him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman, and Naaman saw one running after him. So he came down from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all at peace? And he said, All is at peace. My master has sent me, saying, Behold, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothes. Then Naaman said, Be pleased to take 2 talents. And he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothes and gave them to 2 of his young men, and they carried them before him. So he came to the hill, and he took them from their hand and deposited them in the house. Then he sent them away, and they departed. But he came in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, Where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant went nowhere. Yeah, lying to a prophet of God probably doesn't work out. Then he said to him, Did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to receive money and to receive clothes and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and male and female slaves? Pardon me. Thus the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your seed forever. So he went out from his presence, a leper as white as snow. Chapter 6. And the sons of the prophet said to Elisha, Behold now, the place before you where we are living is too limited for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and each of us take from there a beam, and let us make a place there for ourselves where we may live. So he said, Go. Then one said, Please be willing to go with your servants. And he said, I shall go. So he went with them, and they came to the Jordan and cut down trees. Now it happened that as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water, and he cried out and said, Alas, my master, for it was borrowed. Then the man of God said, Where did it fall? And when he showed him the place, he cut off a stick and threw it in there and made the iron float. And he said, Take it up yourself. So he sent forth his hand and took it. Now the king of Aram was warring against Israel, and he counseled with his servants, saying, In such and such a place shall be my camp. And the man of God sent word to the king of Israel, saying, Beware that you do not pass this place, for the Arameans are coming down there. And the king of Israel sent to the place about which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, so that he guarded himself there more than once or twice. Then the heart of the king of Aram was enraged over this thing, and he called his servants and said to them, Will you not tell me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of the servants said, No, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom. So he said, Go and see where he is, that I may send and take him. And it was told to him, saying, Behold, he is in Dothan. So he sent horses and chariots and heavy artillery forces there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. Then the attendant of the man of God arose early and went out, and behold, a military force with horses and chariots was all around the city. And his young man said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do? So he said, Do not fear, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. Then Elisha prayed and said, O Yahweh, I pray, open his eyes that he may see. And Yahweh opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. And they came down to him, and Elisha prayed to Yahweh and said, "Strike the people with blindness, I pray." So he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Then Elisha said to them, "This is not the way, and this is not the city. Walk after me, and I will walk you over to the man whom you seek." And he walked them over to Samaria. Now it happened that when they had come into Samaria, Elisha said, "O Yahweh, open the eyes of these men that they may see." So Yahweh opened their eyes, and they saw, and behold, they were in the midst of Samaria. Then the king of Israel, when he saw them, said to Elisha, "My father, shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down?" And he said, "You shall not strike them down. Would you strike down those you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and walk back to their master." So he prepared a great feast for them, and when they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they went to their master. And the marauding bands of Arameans did not come again into the land of Israel. Now it happened afterwards that Benhadad, king of Aram, gathered all his military camp and went up and besieged Samaria. Now there was a great famine in Samaria, and behold, they besieged it until a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver, and a fourth of a cab of dove's dung for 5 shekels of silver. As the king of Israel was passing by on the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, save my lord, O king." He said, "If Yahweh does not save you, from where shall I save you? From the threshing floor or from the winepress?" And the king said to her, "What is the matter with you?" And she said, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And I said to her on the next day, 'Give your son, that we may eat him.' But she has hidden her son." Now it happened that when the king heard the words of the woman, he tore his clothes. Now he was passing by on the wall, and the people looked, and behold, he had sackcloth beneath on his body. Then he said, "May God do so to me, and more also, if the head of Elisha, the son of Shaphat, remains on him today." Now Elisha was sitting in his house, and the elders were sitting with him. And the king sent a man from his presence, but before the messenger came to him, he said to the elders, "Do you see how the son of a murderer has sent to take away my head? Look, when the messenger comes, shut the door and hold the door shut against him. Is not the sound of his master's feet behind him?" While he was still speaking with him, behold, the messenger came down to him and said, "Behold, this evil is from Yahweh. Why should I wait for Yahweh any longer?" Chapter 7. Then Elisha said, "Listen to the word of Yahweh. Thus says Yahweh, about this time tomorrow, a seah of fine flour will be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel in the gate of Samaria." And the royal officer on whose hand the king was leaning answered the man of God and said, "Behold, if Yahweh should make windows in heaven, could this thing be?" Then he said, "Behold, you will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat of it." Now there were 4 leprous men at the entrance of the gate, and they said to one another, "Why do we sit here until we die? If we say we will enter the city, then the famine is in the city, and we will die there. And if we sit here, we die also. So now come, and let us go over to the camp of the Arameans. If they spare us, we will live, and if they put us to death, we will die." So they arose at twilight to go to the camp of the Arameans. Then they came to the outskirts of the camp of the Arameans, but behold, there was no one there. Now the Lord had caused the camp of the Arameans to hear a sound of chariots and the sound of horses, even the sound of a great military force, so that they said to one another, "Behold, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of the Egyptians to come upon us." Therefore they arose and fled in the twilight and forsook their tents and their horses and their donkeys, even the camp just as it was, and fled for their life. So these lepers came to the outskirts of the camp and entered one tent and ate and drank. Then they carried from there silver and gold and clothes, and they went and hid them. And they returned and entered another tent and carried from there also and went and hid them. Then they said to one another, "We are not doing right. This day is a day of good news, but we are keeping silent. If we wait until morning light, punishment will overtake us. So now, come, let us go and tell the king's household." So they came and called to the gatekeepers of the city, and they told them, saying, "We came to the camp of the Arameans, and behold, there was no one there, nor the voice of man, only the horses tied and the donkeys tied, and the tents just as they were." And the gatekeepers called and told it within the king's household. Then the king arose in the night and said to his servants, "I will now tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know that we are hungry, therefore they have gone from the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, When they come out of the city, we will capture them alive and get into the city." And one of his servants answered and said, "Please let some men have take 5 of the remaining horses, which remain in the city. Behold, they will be in any case like all the multitude of Israel who remain in it. Behold, they will be in any case like all the multitude of Israel who have already come to an end. So let us send and see." They took therefore 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent after the camp of the Arameans, saying, "Go and see." Then they went after them to the Jordan, and behold, all the way was full of clothes and equipment, which the Arameans had thrown away in their haste. Then the messengers returned and told the king. So the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. Then the seah of fine flour was sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, according to the word of Yahweh. Now the king appointed the royal officer on whose hand he leaned to have charge of the gate. But the people trampled on him at the gate, and he died, just as the man of God had spoken, who spoke when the king came down to him. So it happened just as the man of God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 seahs of barley for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour for a shekel will be sold tomorrow, about this time at the gate of Samaria. And the royal officer had answered the man of God and said, "Now behold, if Yahweh should make windows in heaven, could such a thing be?" And he had said, "Behold, you will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat of it." And so it happened to him. For the people trampled on him at the gate, and he died. Chapter 8. Now Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, "Arise and go with your household and sojourn wherever you can sojourn. For Yahweh has called for a famine, and it will even come to the land for 7 years." So the woman arose and did according to the word of the man of God, and she went with her household and sojourned in the land of the Philistines 7 years. Now it happened at the end of 7 years that the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went out to cry out to the king for her house and for her field. Now the king was speaking with Gehazi, the young man of the man of God, saying, "Please recount to me all the great things that Elisha has done." Now it happened as he was recounting to the king how he had restored to life the one who was dead, that behold, the woman whose son he had restored to life was crying out to the king for her household and for her field. And Gehazi said, "My lord, O king, this is the woman, and this is her son, whom Elisha restored to life." Then the king asked the woman, and she recounted it to him. So the king appointed for her a certain officer, saying, "Restore all that was hers, and all the produce of the field from the day that she left the land even until now." Then Elisha came to Damascus. Now Benhadad, king of Aram, was sick, and it was told to him, saying, "The man of God has come here." And the king said to Hazael, "Take a present in your hand, and go to meet the man of God, and inquire of Yahweh by him, saying, Will I be restored to life from this sickness?" So Hazael went to meet him, and took a present in his hand, even every kind of good thing of Damascus, 40 camel loads. And he came and stood before him, and said, "Your son Benhadad, king of Aram, has sent me to you, saying, Will I be restored to life from this sickness?" Then Elisha said to him, "Go, say to him, you will surely be restored to life. But Yahweh has shown me that he will certainly die." And he fixed his gaze steadily on him until he was ashamed, and the man of God wept. Then Hazael said, "Why does my lord weep?" Then he said, "Because I know the evil that you will do to the sons of Israel. Their fortifications you will set on fire, and their young men you will kill with the sword, and their infants you will dash in pieces, and their pregnant women you will rip up." Then Hazael said, "But what is your servant, who is but a dog, that he should do this great thing?" And Elisha answered, "Yahweh has shown me that you will be king over Aram." So he went from Elisha and came to his master, and he said to him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he said to me that you would surely be restored to life." Now it happened that on the following day that he took the cover and dipped it in water and spread it on his face. So he died, and Hazael became king in his place. Now in the 5th year of Joram the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat became, being the king of Judah. Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, became king. He was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab became his wife, and he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh. However, Yahweh was not willing to make Judah a ruin, for the sake of David his servant, since he had promised him to give a lamp to him through his sons always. In his days, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. Then Joram crossed over to Zaire, and all his chariots with him. And he arose by night and struck the Edomites who were surrounding him and the commanders of the chariots, but his army fled to their tents. So Edom revolted against Judah that day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time. Now the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? So Joram slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Ahaziah his son became king in his place. In the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, became king. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. He also walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, like the house of Ahab had done, because he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Then he went with Joram, the son of Ahab, to war with Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead, and the Arameans struck Joram. So King Joram returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Arameans had caused by striking him at Ramah when he fought against Hazael, king of Aram. Then Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel because he was sick. Chapter 9. Now Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophet and said to him, "Gird up your loins and take this flask of oil in your hand and go to Ramoth Gilead. And you will come there and look there for Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. And you will come in and bid him arise from among his brothers, and you will cause him to come into an inner room. Then you will take a flask of oil and pour it on his head and say, 'Thus says Yahweh, I have anointed you king over Israel.' Then open the door and flee and do not wait." So the young man of the prophet, went to Ramoth Gilead. Then he came, and behold, the commanders of the military were sitting, and he said, "I have a word for you, O commander." And Jehu said, "For which one of us?" And he said, "For you, O commander." And he arose and came into the house, and he poured the oil on his head and said to him, "Thus says Yahweh, the God of Israel, I have anointed you king over the people of Yahweh, even over Israel. And you shall strike the house of Ahab, your master, that I may avenge the blood of my slaves, the prophets, and the blood of all the slaves of Yahweh at the hand of Jezebel. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male person, both bond and free in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah. And the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the property of Jezreel, and none shall bury her." Then he opened the door and fled. Now Jehu came out to the servants of his master, and one said to him, "Is it well? Why did this bad fellow come to you?" And he said to them, "You know the man and his talk." And they said, "It is a lie. Declare it to us now." And he said, "Thus and thus he said to me, 'Thus says Yahweh, I have anointed you king over Israel.'" Then they hurried, and each man took his garment and placed it under him on the bare steps and blew the trumpet, saying, "Jehu is king." So Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram with all Israel was guarding Ramoth Gilead against Hazael, king of Aram. But King Joram had returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Arameans had struck him when he fought with Hazael, king of Aram. So Jehu said, "If this is your mind, then let no one escape or leave the city to go declare it in Jezreel." Then Jehu rode in a chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram was lying there. Ahaziah, king of Judah, had come down to see Joram. Now the watchman was standing on the tower in Jezreel, and he saw the company of Jehu as he came, and said, "I see a company." And Joram said, "Take a horseman and send him to meet them, and let them say, 'Is it peace?'" So a horseman went to meet him and said, "Thus says the king, 'Is it peace?'" And Jehu said, "What have you to do with peace? Turn behind me." And the watchman declared, saying, "The messenger came to them, but he did not return." Then he sent out a second horseman, and he came to them and said, "Thus says the king, 'Is it peace?'" And Jehu answered, "Why, what have you to do with peace? Turn behind me." And the watchman declared, saying, "He came up to them, but he did not return. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he drives in madness." Then Joram said, "Get ready." And they made his chariot ready. Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot. And they went out to meet Jehu and found him in the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. Now it happened that When Joram saw Jehu, he said, "Is it peace, Jehu?" And he answered, "What peace? So long as the harlotries of your mother Jezebel and her sorceries are so many." So Joram turned about and fled and said to Ahaziah, "There is deception, O Ahaziah." And Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and struck Joram between his arms. And the arrow went through his heart, and he crouched down in his chariot. Then Jehu said to Bidkar, his officer, "Lift him up and cast him into the property of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For I remember when you and I were riding together after Ahab his father, that Yahweh lifted up this oracle against him. Surely I have seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, says Yahweh, and I will repay you in this property, says Yahweh. So now lift him up and cast him into the property according to the word of Yahweh." And Ahaziah the king of Judah saw this and fled by the way of the garden house. And Jehu pursued him and said, "Strike him down too in the chariot." So they struck him down at the ascent of Gur, which is in Ibleam. But he fled to Megiddo and died there. Then his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem and buried him in his grave with his fathers in the city of David. Now in the 11th year of Joram the son of Ahab, Ahaziah became king over Judah. Then Jehu came to Jezreel, and Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her eyes and adorned her head and looked out the window. And Jehu entered the gate. As Jehu entered the gate, she said, "Is it peace, Zimri, your master's killer?" Then he lifted up his face to the window and said, "Who is on my side? Who?" And 2 or 3 officials looked down at him. And he said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trampled her underfoot. Then he came in and ate and drank, and he said, "Take care now of this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter." They went to bury her, but they found nothing more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Therefore they returned and declared it to him, and he said, "This is the word of Yahweh, which he spoke to his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the property of Jezreel the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel will be as dung on the face of the field in the property of Jezreel, so they cannot say, This is Jezebel." All right, we will read chapter 10, and I think we will finish. We might read 11 too. All right, let's keep going. I do have to watch my time because I have been tasked with putting on tonight's crock-pot dinner. Don't worry, it's all fully prepared. No meal will be harmed by Tony touching it. I'm just helping Maria out of it. So, all right, chapter 10. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, and Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the rulers of Jezreel, the elders and the guardians of the children of Ahab, saying, So now when this letter comes to you, since your master's sons are with you, as well as the chariots and horses and a fortified city and the weapons, look for the best and the fittest of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. But they feared exceedingly greatly, and said, Behold, the 2 kings did not stand before him. How then can we stand? And the one who was over the household and he who was over the city, the elders and the guardians of the children, sent word to Jehu, saying, We are your servants. All that you say to us, we will do. We will not make any man king. Do what is good in your sight. Then he wrote a letter to them a second time, saying, If you are on my side, and you will listen to my voice, take the heads of the men, your master's sons, and come to me about this time tomorrow at Jezreel. Now the king's sons, 70 persons, were with the great men of the city who were rearing them. Now it happened that when the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slaughtered them, 70 persons, and put their heads in baskets and sent them to him at Jezreel. Then the messenger came and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. So he said, Put them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning. Now it happened in the morning that he went out and stood and said to all the people, You are righteous. Behold, I conspired against my master and killed him. But who struck down all these? Know then that nothing from the word of Yahweh, which Yahweh spoke concerning the house of Ahab, shall fall to the earth. Indeed, Yahweh has done what he spoke by the hand of his servant Elijah. So Jehu struck down all who remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, and all his great men and his acquaintances and his priests, until there was no survivor remaining for him. Then he arose and came out and went to Samaria. And on the way, while he was at Beth Eked of the shepherds, Jehu found the relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and said, "Who are you?" And they said, "We are the relatives of Ahaziah. We have come down to greet the sons of the king and the sons of the queen mother." Then he said, "Take them alive." So they took them alive and slaughtered them at the pit of Beth Eked, 42 men, and he left none of them. Then he went from there and found Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. And he blessed him and said to him, "Is your heart right, as my heart is with your heart?" And Jehonadab answered, "It is." Jehu said, "If it is, give me your hand." And he gave him his hand, and he took him up into the chariot. Then he said, "Come with me and see my zeal for Yahweh." So he made him ride in his chariot. And he came to Samaria and struck down all who were left to Ahab in Samaria, until he had destroyed him according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke to Elijah. Then Jehu gathered all the people and said to them, "Ahab served Baal a little, Jehu will serve him much. So now summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his slaves and all his priests. Let no one be missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live." But Jehu did it in cunning, so that he might cause the slaves of Baal to perish. And Jehu said, "Sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal," and they summoned them. Then Jehu sent throughout Israel, and all the slaves of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. So they came into the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. Then he said to the one who was in charge of the wardrobe, bring out garments for all the slaves of Baal." So he brought out garments for them. And Jehu came into the house of Baal with Jehonadab, the son of Rechab. And he said to the slaves of Baal, "Search and see, lest there be here with you any of the slaves of Yahweh," but only the slaves of Baal. Then they came in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had placed for himself 80 men outside, and he had said, "The one who permits any of the men whom I cause to come into your hands to escape shall give up his life in exchange." Now it happened that as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and to the royal officers, "Come in, strike them down, let none come out." And they struck them down with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the royal officers threw them out and went to the inner room of the house of Baal. And they brought out the sacred pillars of the house of Baal and burned them. They also broke down the sacred pillar of Baal and broke down the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. Thus Jehu destroyed Baal out of Israel. However, as for the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel sin, from these Jehu did not depart, even the golden calves that were at Bethel and that were at Dan. And Yahweh said to Jehu, "Because you have done well in doing what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the fourth generation shall sit on the throne of Israel." But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of Yahweh, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel sin. In those days, Yahweh began to cut off portions from Israel, and Hazael struck them throughout the territory of Israel, from the Jordan to the east toward the sunrise, all the land of Gilead, the Gadites and the Reubenites and the Manassites from Aroer, which is by the valley of the Arnon, even Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu and all that he did and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? And Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. And Jehoahaz his son became king in his place. Now the time which Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. How are we doing? All right, one more chapter. We'll read chapter 11. It's a short chapter, and we'll call it a day. I think that'll be 9 chapters today, so not bad. Chapter 11. Now Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son had died, so she rose and caused all the royal seed to perish. But Jehosheba, Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah. Wow, that was okay. Do over. Chapter 11. Now Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son had died. She rose and caused all the royal seed to perish. But Josheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the king's sons, who were being put to death, and put him and his nurse in the bedroom. So they hid him from Athaliah, and he was not put to death. So he was hidden away with her in the house of Yahweh 6 years with Athaliah, while Athaliah was reigning over the land. Now in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent for and took the commanders of hundreds of the Kerites and of the guard, and brought them to him in the house of Yahweh. Then he cut a covenant with them, and had them swear in the house of Yahweh, and showed them the king's son. And he commanded them, saying, This is the thing that you shall do, 1/3 of you, who come in on the Sabbath, and keep watch over the king's house. 1/3 also shall be at the gate, sir, and 1/3 at the gate behind the guards, shall keep watch over the house for defense. And 2 parts of you, even all who go out on the Sabbath, shall also keep watch over the house of Yahweh for the king. And you shall surround the king, each with his weapons in his hand. And whoever comes within the ranks shall be put to death, and be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in. So the commanders of hundreds did according to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded. And each one of them took his men who were to come in on the Sabbath, with those who were to go out on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. Then the priest gave to the commanders of hundreds the spears and small shields that had been King David's, which were in the house of Yahweh. And the guard stood each with his weapons in his hand, from the right side of the house to the left side of the house, by the altar and by the house around the king. Then he brought the king's son out, and put the crown on him, and gave him the testimony, and they made him king and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, Long live the king. Then Athaliah heard the noise of the guard and of the people, and she came to the people in the house of Yahweh. And she looked, and behold, the king was standing by the pillar according to the custom, with the commanders and the trumpeters beside the king. And all the people of the land were glad and blew trumpets. Then Athaliah tore her clothes and cried, Treason! Treason! And Jehoiada the priest commanded the commanders of hundreds, who were appointed over the military force, and said to them, Bring her out between the ranks, and whoever follows her put to death with the sword. For the priest said, Let her not be put to death in the house of Yahweh. So they laid hands on her, and she arrived at the horse's entrance of the lost my place there. So they laid hands on her, and she arrived at the horse's entrance of the king's house, and was put to death there. Then Jehoiada cut a covenant between Yahweh and the king and the people, that they would be the people of Yahweh also between the king and the people. And all the people of the land came to the house of Baal and tore it down. His altars and his images they broke in pieces thoroughly. And they killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, before the altars. And the priests appointed overseers over the house of Yahweh. And he took commanders of hundreds, and the Kerites, and the guards, and all the people of the land. And they brought the king down from the house of Yahweh, and came by the way of the gate of the guards to the king's house. And he sat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land were glad, and the city was quiet, for they had put Athaliah to death with the sword of the king's house. Yeah, got to stop there. All right. Again, I think that was about 9 chapters. Lord willing, we'll pick up at our regular time, 7 a.m. Central, tomorrow in 2 Kings chapter 12. 2 Kings chapter 12. We're moving right along. Hey, I hope you all have a blessed day in the Lord. Love you guys. And I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning for another edition of Bible Reading Fellowship. Have a great day. Bye-bye.